I want to welcome you back to Peak Performance Masterclass. Everyone wants to be next level. I want to go to the next level. I want to develop. I want to be someone. I want to do something. I want it to last. Well, how do you get there? You have to have someone that gives you counsel, not opinions. What I've endeavored to do is to make sure that I bring people together that give you a peek into what you can be because they developed it for themselves. This is not about being perfect. It's not about being flawless. These people have failed enough that they learned how to win, and then they turned it and how to give people wind. Wind behind them, wind behind you, so that you could become more than you were when they met you. I want you to be able to see what you can be because of who they are. Borrowing their experiences. Peak performance is not about being perfect. It's about being able to see a vision of who you can be through the eyes, lens, and hearts of others. That's why today I brought before me one of the men that I've grown to admire and honor. Scott Gordon is here. He's an attorney, but he's more than that. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a servant. The first thing that he leads with is not what he's done, it's who he's become. Scott, as we begin, if you would give a little snapshot, the elevator pitch about who you are, your background, how'd you grow up, how'd you get so skinny, all of those things. No, but give a little bit of background about how you grew up,
Sure.
then tell about who you became.
Sure. So today I run a boutique business law firm, and we traditionally work with business owners, entrepreneurs that are trying to develop their businesses, protect their assets, surround themselves with great people, and normally our target is to help them grow by 10x over a 3-year period. So those are some of the internal metrics that we govern ourselves by. But I grew up pretty much locally, raised by wonderful parents. All 4 of my grandparents were school teachers. My mother was a school teacher, and my dad was an entrepreneur, but he also had a law degree. And so that kind of gave me something to aspire to, is just kind of watching his lifestyle. He was a great man. He is a great man, great leader. But I grew up in a household middle of 6, and I always thought it may be the birth order, but I was diagnosed at a young age with ADHD, which I think later I contribute to being kind of a superpower, because I was able to maybe develop some processes around being all over the place. And I was really fortunate when I was in 6th grade. I had a school teacher, because up to that point I was really failing most of my classes. I was a behavioral challenge for my teachers. I spent almost every day in the principal's office. But when I was in 6th grade, this teacher gave me all the assignments for the week on Monday morning. And so by Monday at lunch, I had all my assignments completed. And so the rest of the week, he kind of took me under his wing and he made me the teacher's helper. And that was the first time in my young life that I began to think maybe I can do some of these things. He also let me grade my own report card. So my parents were really surprised when I came home with straight A's all year long.
Wow.
But he was a great man. So I found that being ADHD wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just kind of gave me some opportunities to be focused on a lot of things at once.
Wow.
And
You're successful now.
Yeah.
You went off to, after high school, you were an athlete in high school, correct?
yeah, I played for one of the most successful coaches in Utah history as a football coach. Very, very blessed to be able to work with him. He took a bunch of young men that were really an okay team, and he took 32 young men and gave them discipline and character. And he cared more about who we became and who we would become than about a winning team.
Wow.
But despite all that, we actually were a very successful team. We went to the state championship with only 17 players.
Wow.
And so it was really great.
So it was all hands on deck for real.
Yeah.
So here's 2 things I want to point out. You mentioned some pivotal people.
Yeah.
First, I want to start off with the fact that you had something to overcome. Most people think that you have to have, the people that succeed never have something to overcome. For you to be able to harness that ADHD was something that you not only have to embrace, but that you could turn that into a superpower.
Yeah.
That's a shift in mindset.
Yeah.
Because it could have been the thing you said, the reason why I can't, especially since you had already gotten behavioral issues and challenges, but the problem is they just didn't know how to harness the gift that you had.
Yeah.
And so Great parents didn't have a thing to do with it. Being the middle child didn't have anything to do with it. It was simply the fact of finding out, all right, here's what I have to overcome. And if I do that, here's what I can do with it. So that's something I want to acknowledge, because that isn't an easy thing to do. Most of us, even myself, struggle when you have a disability or a struggle to overcome. Sometimes we can allow that to become the definition of us. You didn't do that.
No, and I do attribute that sixth grade teacher just to help me better understand and that I was smart. I really thought I was the dumb kid because my behaviors reflected bad grades. And then I began to say, look, I'm getting A's on my report card. Honestly, probably not because I earned it, but because this teacher gave me the opportunity to grade myself. And later when I got into college, I had an academic scholarship, full ride, but I also had an athletic scholarship.
You can't beat that. In fact, man, I want to say this. People that inspired you, you mentioned the teacher and you mentioned the football coach there. The difference between they motivated you, like, hey, let's go, let's get this done. Here's the homework, get it done. That's external. How did they ignite the fire within you? What was it about them that gave you the confidence? You said the teacher helped you to believe. They believed in you until you could believe in yourself.
Yeah, that was very true. I didn't realize that I really had the motivation. I just needed a little bit of framework. I need some boundaries. And with the boundaries and kind of an unlimited potential, instead of giving me the structure saying, you have to do this at this time, that wasn't a behavior that I could really fit within. But give me a lot more work to do in a shorter amount of time, I was successful at that.
Wow. There goes another opportunity for us to all grow from. That you need discipline, you needed structure, and then you need the freedom and the creativity to be able to operate within that.
Right.
So it wasn't about, hey, here's the process. I give you the homework each day. You go back and do it. They gave it all to you at one time, and you had the skill set and the ability to be able to maximize it because they gave you the freedom of being able to do it.
Yeah, and it wasn't just in sixth grade. When I got to college, I found out that I got better grades and I was more successful when I took twice the load of credits every semester. So it wasn't just give me 12 hours. If I could do 24 hours in a semester, I was actually more successful.
Wow.
So
There was something to learn from that. Most people will shy away from the stresses of that. They will say that a young person can't handle, there's no way I can go to school full time, especially to carry 24 hours. There's no way that I can put in the work that's necessary, have a job, how I'm going to eat and all those things. How did you multitask? How did you handle that?
So I found that if I really had the material, I could get through it because I had to. I didn't have the extra time. You know, it's like that Matthew's Law. A task expands or contracts to fit the time allowed to complete it. And so having less amount of time, I really had to focus. And so, and because I was working. By the time I got to law school, I was working plus taking extra hours in law school just to complete it.
Wow. Being able to be willing to put yourself under that workload, it pulls something out of you. You also saw that you could handle it. And the more that you did, but sometimes when it comes to that hyper success, when it comes to being under the gun, did you find yourself like overdoing it, where you took on too many things because you got so successful? Did you ever come to that point like, hey, and then you find yourself like, I feel like I can do anything, so I do a lot more, and then you're like, wait a minute, I may have overdone it here.
You know, I was worried about that quite often because I had lots of people warning me that would happen. But I found that giving me more to do and higher expectations forced me to rise to the challenge.
Wow.
And so for me, it was actually a better formula for success. As long as I could maintain my scholarships and, college and law school, it really didn't matter if I was working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. And so I quite enjoy life better when there's a lot going on.
I was thinking about this. I think that the pressure, instead of breaking you, it really did make a diamond out of your heart and purpose and your skill set. Would you agree that the fact that a lot of us, the reason why some of us aren't successful is because we've allowed ourselves to believe that there's a limit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in society and teachers and, the schools, the graduate schools, they're all telling you there's a limit. Here's how society expects you to behave. I like to think of one of my examples in life when I was flying to Tahiti with my wife. And we got to the LA airport. We had a 6-week-old baby with us, and we were getting ready to board the plane to Tahiti from LAX.
Right.
And they said, well, where's the passport for the baby? And we said, we don't have a passport for the baby. He's only 6 weeks old. And so they said, oh, it's impossible. You can't get it on this flight without a passport. So I said, a series of 22 it's impossibles happened over the next couple hours. Well, 4 hours. But we said, well, where do you get a passport? And they go, we don't know. Well, if you were me, where would you go? And they go, well, I'd try somewhere downtown LA. So we look it up. This is pre-smartphones.
Right.
And so we went downtown and we went to the federal building, and everyone said, oh, the line goes around the building. It's impossible for you to get in line. Well, if you were me, I'd say, what do you have to do to get to the front of the line? And then we talked to the person at the counter, and they said, it's impossible. You aren't going to be able to get a passport today. And I said, well, if you were me, who would you go talk to get a passport today? And we just kept using it. And 22 impossibles. We got a passport that day, got back to the airport, and got on a flight to Tahiti.
Dude, I got to tell you, not only congratulations on putting grinding for your family like that, but giving the kid a Tahiti experience that early. That's a heck of a vacation schedule to start off with. But there was something you said there that I think everyone has to look at. See, peak performers, it's about learning things that others don't want to learn, right? They don't take the time or the effort to learn, I should say.
Yeah.
You can ask people's opinion, or you can ask and get consult from people who knows. And so if you just take an opinion, if you'd have turned away from the counter and said, man, this is messed up, and just got angry, people would have had empathy with you and said, man, I feel you on that, right? Some people would have had sympathy. It's a shame that you and your baby.
Yeah.
But you turned around and you stayed there and stayed in the fire and said, if you were me, what would you do?
Yep.
And you gave it to them, which allowed them to partake in that and become a part of that storyline.
Yeah.
And each time you kept doing that. And really the success that we have, it's important to have mentors along the way.
Yeah.
Who do you turn to that can give you advice on what to do to go to the next level? If you don't have anyone that pushes you, if you don't have anyone that gives you advice, then you're left to your own devices. And that is, if you're in a city, you don't know where you're at, you're trying to go somewhere, all you got is emotion, frustration, and gut check.
Yeah.
But when you can get the wisdom of others, that's where you truly grow. I think that's kind of one of the great things about how you began to live your life. How did that serve you throughout life? Did you continually to find people along the way at every rung, whether you got into sales, whether as an attorney, did you always keep that same habit of, if you were me, what would you do?
You know, I did develop it in my early college days. Well, before I went to law school, actually, I started to identify people that were successful, people that I would love to have them coach me or mentor me. And then I couldn't believe it, frankly, that kind of a kid pre-law school, but I was in college looking around, what should I do? But I called people up and I said, hey, would you mind giving me an hour of your time? I've got 3 questions I'd love to ask you. And everybody gave me time, that 1 hour. And they took me in and they let me ask my 3 questions. And the summary of each question was essentially, what would you do if you were me?
Right.
Because I don't want to say I want to have your life, but I said to the people, I perceive you to be somebody that I would like to emulate your lifestyle. And so if you were me, and I'd go through these questions, inevitably I got some amazing counsel.
Well, you said something. This is the difference between Napoleon Hill, right, and what made him successful, is he got to sit down and talk with people who were successful and people who had won and ask them questions, and it became a treasure trove for everyone else to glean from. But yet very few modeled that. You took that, and now look what that has done for you. It served you well. Most people have taken it that I don't want anyone's opinion. I don't want anyone to judge me. We take all the negative aspects, and we separated ourselves from knowledge and opportunities. Yeah. When you sit there, were there times where people gave you advice that maybe you didn't agree with, right? But you still had to calculate it.
There were lots of times I was given so-called counsel, and the best counsel often came from people that didn't think I had what it would take to be successful at that area. I was practicing law, so I was just a young law school graduate working, and I found this guy who was making $2.5–3 million a year. So very successful financially. And I said to him, how would I do what you're doing? Because again, I was getting my butt kicked, working 80–90 hours a week, barely getting by. But what you do is you're a young associate. You work long hours and hardly get paid. And I said, why do I have to go through this process in order to become successful? I mean, look what this guy's doing. And so I said, how do I do that? And he goes, well, and at the end of the conversation, he said, you're honestly not going to be able to make it because it's not just about being smart. It's not just, you got to be lucky. And I looked at the guy and I said, you know what? Despite your advice, I think I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
It was kind of the impossible standard, I was asking, what would you do if you were me? And he was saying, you can't do it.
Yeah, it's impossible. In fact, I think that might have been the best driver for. There are times where people will say to you, there's no way you can accomplish something.
Yeah.
And so they put a chip on our shoulders, and it's upon us to either eat the chip and be frustrated and resent, or you can take the chip and say, let me come back and show you what a trophy looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely a decision that is made there. And you made those choices. See, but life is about a series of choices that you're making.
Right.
Is the choice to either take the teacher's picking on you or the perception that someone's calling you the pet, right? Because you're assisting. It was the work that it took to be able to take 17 players and become a champion. Did you ever go back and thank those mentors? Did you ever have a chance to do that?
As often as I could. Still to this day, that football coach is still alive, and those 17 guys and all the guys that were on our team, we get together to just honor this man.
Wow.
I mean, he taught us that we didn't have to cuss on the field. He expected us to not get involved in drugs and alcohol. He expected us to live at a higher standard. And so we began to. And it was kind of that famous, this is a football kind of coach.
Yeah.
Every day we did the same plays, practice again and again for a half hour every single day. We go right, we go left. And you go, don't you think we know these plays by now?
Right.
And he said, I hope you do, but we're going to do it again. So he he invited us to practice our daily disciplines. And I think that with consistency over time has made this team of young men very successful in the aggregate. So
because this thing carried over in other areas of life.
All areas of life.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, being consistent in the things that matter most, which are often just the basics. If you can be consistent in those areas, then you tend to be successful in other areas.
When you took these principles, was there a goal? Did you ever see yourself? I know that most people come out and say, man, I want to be able to buy a house, I want to do those things. Did you set those as goals, or what was your goals as you now that you're driven, now that you've harnessed your superpower, you've had the right mentors, you're asking the perfect questions. Were there goals or things you had set up? Like, I want to own a house, I want to have this, or did you not have material goals?
No, I think it's important to always have, different standards to compare yourself, or metrics that kind of help identify whether or not you're on the right path.
Okay.
And so, there were things that were material goals, but the things that really matter most aren't material. They're
That's
just
right.
kind of ways to keep score.
So after you got the scorecard, I know that for me, I sit there and I was like, once I get the house, we get the car, you get this, you get the clothing, get the jewelry, any of those things. There were things that you wanted. But after you got it, you saw that they weren't what satisfied.
Right.
They're money, time, and energy. You can invest those three things in things that last years, a lifetime, or eternity. The things that you found that has given you the greatest reward, and years were cars, things like that. Things that are lifetime, marriage, your family.
Yeah.
Things that are eternity is your purpose.
Yeah.
What have you learned along the way? Those disciplines have led you down that path. What matters most to Scott?
Well, I was fortunate in the questions I was asking that group of mentors or coaches early on, because I was able to distill all the advice from all of them that I met with into three things. When I get to be their age, which I did an average of everything, I compiled it and tried to say, okay, when I'm 55 years old, when I'm, this successful, these are the things that are going to matter to me. And not one of them was money.
Wow.
Number one, I'm going to care about my family. Every one of them said the thing that matters most is your spouse and your children, your grandchildren. So protect those. Number two is your health, because you don't get that back. And so I thought about that going, you can't buy health.
No.
In fact, the wealthiest people would buy health if they could.
Yeah. They would do it immediately, time and time again.
Yeah, but it's not something you can stroke a check for and get.
That's
You got to
right.
earn it. Same thing with, a family. You've got to earn that over time. And the third was a reputation, because it's something that you can spend 30 years building and lose it in 30 minutes. So strive to maintain it, strive to keep it in check. And so those are the things that really mattered most to me. And I'd say today, now that I'm a grandfather, I've got 8 kids and 8 grandkids. Those are the things that matter most to me. I've got to be healthy enough to enjoy life. I've got to be able to hopefully demonstrate to my kids and grandkids that this is what matters to me, and hopefully that's the right example for them.
Well, not only is it hopefully, I'm going to tell you outright, the greatest gift that we can give kids is not a photo album or a picture that was Grandpa, but give them a picture of what Grandpa was about. You are driving every day to set a tone, and you have sons and daughters, right?
Yep.
How did they, rearing them, how did you pass on those skill sets to others? How did you give that to them? What did you try to instill in them? Were there procedures? Are there things you said to them? Did you give them the 3 questions? What was the important ingredient you were passing on that was part of that inheritance that isn't money?
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say that I raised my daughters the same way I raised my sons. I think for me, having my daughters, I just loved them. And I just said, I'm going to love you, and what can I do to help you? Because I have amazing daughters, and they're all very successful. But my boys, I was tougher on. I told them that the most important thing for them was to be able to manage their attitudes, their state of mind, their mindset, because life was going to be challenging, and it should be, because we learn 10 or 100 times more from our failures than we ever do from our mistakes. And so a failure isn't failure unless we just stay down. So on our fridge it says it's not how far you fall, it's how far can you bounce back.
Man, that bounce back is one of probably the biggest thing that young men struggle with is emotional maturity and things.
Yeah.
What do you do when someone betrays you in business? What do you do when you do a handshake deal and you believe that this is binding? You've been raised under the honor system of code. You talked about the reputation. So many people have gone through that and they've gotten jaded because they were like, I was trustworthy until people broke my trust. And then they go on guard. How did you avoid that?
Oh, I've made every mistake. So I don't want to ever pretend like there wasn't a mistake out there that I couldn't make. I mean, I've made them all. And so, I've done plenty of deals on a handshake. I've often been the last person standing when the music stops. And so when people look around and say who's standing, who's the first to fail, it, fell on me. But I think, not trying to blame anybody for those situations, but say, what can I learn? I lost a crazy amount of money in the 2008 real estate crash.
Oh, wow.
And so, it affected me for years. But I didn't look at it and say, how unfair is this for me? It's what can I learn from it?
Can you dive into that for a moment?
Sure.
In 2008, the day you woke up and saw that the money was going the wrong direction, what was your emotional state, and how did you collect yourself to go after? You talked to your kids about attitude and all those things, but when you were under the fire, how did you respond?
Well, I kept thinking somehow I'm going to survive this. So I really did believe that there was a way out. And so I suffered, painfully for almost 2 years. I mean, the amount of cash flow to try to plug the holes was, too much eventually. Yeah. And so it was a painful, I had to end up filing bankruptcy just to protect my house and just to give me some time to get into another house. Yeah. And so it wasn't easy. And it sure is humbling, but I'm grateful for the humility and the lesson learned there. And so hopefully the next time, I kind of expect there to be downturns. And so I don't want it to come as a shock the next time there's a cycle. I think in all life, there's cycles that need to be predicted as well.
Man, I think that's one of the few things as an entrepreneur. When we're advising, you're talking to people about performance and being able to be a peak performer, is how do you manage your attitude when you fall?
Yeah.
But not only how do you manage that, it is the fact that just because bad things happen to you doesn't mean that that's going to happen continually.
Right.
When things are good, that will pass. Right. When things are bad, that too shall pass.
Right.
You just have to be able to pass those tests. Same way that you took you look at your history. People wonder, like, how do I survive something when bad things happen? You have to be able to get historical. What did you, and when I look at you, I think that you had to rely on the fact that I come from a family that loves me in spite of everything.
Yeah.
So I have support, I have strength, but if I have a history, if 17 people could outperform a full team, if I can go to school and I can take a double load, no matter how bad it is, whatever I face must also face me. You embodied that. And so when you were in that situation, you're struggling like, man, I gotta do it. How did you handle the spouse challenges? Because most men can't come home and be like, hey, babe, let me tell you something. I lost everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Everything plus.
Yeah, everything plus. How did you manage that part? Because that's usually where most people have their biggest failure. Finances go, relationships go, and they don't bounce back for a long time. But you were able to keep your family together.
Yeah.
What was it? What was the difference?
Well, hopefully I become better at this, but communicating what was going on, even if I didn't want to, it was really painful. You don't want to admit that I'm going through a failure experience. But fortunately, I was able to communicate it, and my wife was great. She supported me through it, and she knew that we were going to go through some lean times. And so, she was a real champ.
So you said that easy. So you just walked up and said, hey, listen, it's about to get lean in here. I just want you to, I saw you throw away, there was still some butter on that. So we might need to hold on. I mean, like, how did you, when you say she took it, how did you go to deliver bad news? Because part of leadership is being able to convey bad news and still keep your optimism when it's bad. How did you convey that? Because everything rises and falls in that leadership.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say it was a one moment, hey, we're losing everything, but it was a series of unfortunate events. And so it happened over 3 years.
Okay.
So the real estate crash was one of them, but then other things beginning to fail because of the negative cash flow and all the stitching and patching we were trying to put on to keep the ship floating.
Right.
But I had to deal with it, honestly. I don't think it was her favorite time. We'd gone through some times of affluence, and we started to feel like, hey, we're going to make this. But here I am, many years later, I look back at it, I'm going, I am so appreciative of that moment in time, because it really did teach me again what matters most. And that, I've got some successful people around me, and I love to watch them. But one of the things that I always think about is it's not who you are right now. It's how are you going to come back?
Wow.
Because most of the best people that I've worked with, the best coaches, the best mentors, have had some success, but they've learned and probably done their best work after a failure.
Wow. The comeback.
Yeah, the comeback.
See, everyone loves stories of Rudy. Everyone loves the fact that someone that gets on the field and they get that one tackle and that's it, But I was sitting there listening to the actual Rudy talk, and he's like, I didn't get any money out of that deal. They took advantage of me, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not enough just to have the emotional win. You have to fight back and get everything that was there. It takes a mindset. The comeback doesn't come just because you stand back up. The comeback comes because you get up, determined to not go back down. When you got up again from that, what did you do differently? How did you get in the fight so that there wasn't just a one-off story like a Rudy, where like, hey, there's Scott. Man, Scott was successful, but then 2008 happened. Okay. How did you turn that into the Rocky story rather than Rudy?
Well, I had to have some behavioral changes, plus some mindset changes. Okay. Had to recognize that maybe success isn't a straight line. It's kind of a series of events. Some are failures and some are successes. But the behavioral changes was I had to leave what I was doing before, and I started working with some other people. So I went from kind of running my own practice, my own firm, which I do today again, but I went in-house counsel with some early stage companies. And so I was always attracted to those leaders that had a mindset of hyper growth, and we can see it. There's a company in town here called ZAG, a public company. And when I met the co-founder and CEO, Robert Peterson, they just had a little piece of plastic that they put on top of watch faces at the time. And the smartphone was just barely coming out at that point.
Okay.
And so this is about the same time as the real estate crash. And so I was talking to him about his company. They were doing about $1 million a year.
Wait, they were making $1 million putting covers on watches.
Yeah, clear protective screen protection over devices, watches.
There's no way you saw that was going to be the way up. Yeah, I know there's no way you dreamed that my bounce back in the real estate from the loss of 2008 will be getting screen protectors on a watch.
On watches and on smartphones, but this is 2008.
See, okay, so what? So the emergence of smartphones is coming. How did you have the nerve, because it wasn't your core competency from real estate to jump into dealing? How did you have the foresight to see what it could be, or to even trust that might be an angle to go down?
So it was interesting. I don't think I had enough of this skill set to identify what was going to come in that industry.
Okay.
But I really was attracted to the energy of the leader there. And Robert Peterson had a vision, and he was a great guy. And he let me go in and basically kind of plan my own role. I became almost like a chief operating officer, plus the chief legal officer for this company. And we went from about $1 million in sales in the end of 2008 to about the end of 2011. We just completed about $450 million in sales.
Hold on a minute, because sometimes you say numbers, and you said you went from $400 in sales.
$1 million in sales.
Right, 1 million
at the end of 2008.
Wait, hold on. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same numbers with extra zeros. So all right, we take it from 1 million to what?
450 million.
Wow. So when you started off, you kind of gave me impression that you 3X people. That's not what you do. That's more than.
Well, I can't take this success, but I was part of it.
Yeah. So, but you advise people. You said, I think, to help them 3X. You did more than 3X that one. You guys did, but it's because of the team. I think the key you pointed out. You said, give me a visionary that has energy and is willing to give creativity and freedom to people to grow and go.
Yeah.
And it fit in your wheelhouse because all along the way, the things that were happening to you from a child, you became a part of the team with the teacher.
Right.
You became a part of the team with 17 unique young men who are still connected today and took on those same disciplines. I don't think the success that you had as part of that team came because of when you joined them with your education. I think it started the day that you began from a kid developing those behaviors, because there's a road that we travel. It's less traveled by many because it's hard work to get there.
Yeah.
And most people would love to just think that it should come. Yeah. Opportunities are going to open up. You'll be able to recognize it. You didn't even recognize that, but you trusted a visionary and the energy that he brought to the table because of his character.
True. And he was unique in the sense that he wasn't trying to micromanage me. He allowed me to explore. And we were launching new products. I mean, one of my favorite I love to tell the story about is we came up with this little single-sided keyboard. And the iPad was just being released. Okay. And we said, what unique products can we build around this mobile experience with this so-called iPad that was just being released? We didn't know what it was going to be called at the time. We knew it was coming out.
Right.
But Apple and Steve Jobs still hadn't called it the iPad. And we were trying to develop products around this design that hadn't been released. And so we found this keyboard, got some IP around it, and anyway, you take your iPad, you put it in, connected Bluetooth to the iPad, and so you could type on it and use it in a different way, and it protected the iPad. So this was this was kind of a religious experience for people in this iPhone world, because now they see a big iPad.
Yeah.
And one of those early adopters was a guy named MC Hammer. And I said to our CEO, Robert, I said, wouldn't it be clever if we could have a campaign where we could get Hammer to say, can't scratch this, kind of like his Can't Touch This song.
Right, yeah.
And so Robert said, go for it, see what you can do. So I contacted MC Hammer and invited him to a Major League Baseball All-Star game.
Baseball is his thing.
Yep.
That was his passion.
Yep.
Well studied.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oakland A's. He was a bat boy at
That's
a young
right.
age. So
for the A's, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Where he grew up. Still lives in Oakland.
Wow.
But I contacted him and said, hey, would you like to participate? He said, sure. So a couple months later, I find me with my 10-year-old son at the time sitting next to Jesse Jackson and MC Hammer and a couple of other big deals at this MLB All-Star game.
Wow.
And I said, we really don't belong here. But I did become friends with Hammer and found him to be a real wonderful man. Wow. And so I showed him this product, and I lifted up the iPad above my head, and I put the iPad in this case that we just developed, and I dropped it onto the floor. And he goes, you can't do that. And I said, no, I'm not worried about it. No, between you and me, I was worried about it. But we pick it up, and everything's fine. It was protected. And he goes, that's incredible. And so a couple months later, we were presenting it to Apple. And so I invited Hammer to come with me. I said to the Apple VP, is it okay if I bring a friend of mine named Hammer? He's been helping us on this. And they go, the Hammer? And so it was supposed to be a meeting with 2 or 3 vice presidents. We ended up filling the auditorium at Apple. And everybody wanted to meet Hammer. He's a big deal out in Silicon Valley. And so anyway, it was a successful meeting at Apple. And I was driving him to the airport. And he'd just been invited by Oprah to do a show called Where Are They Now? And so on the way to the airport, I told Hammer, I said, if you take this product and you can get Oprah to say the name of the company, I'll give you 100, well, I shouldn't say the numbers.
Yeah.
But I gave him all these benchmarks to help him kind of motivate, right?
Right.
But he was going to do what he's going to do anyway.
Right.
But I said, if this works out, it'll be a nice payday for you.
Right.
And so he gets on the Oprah show, and not only does she hold it, say the name of the company, she later says, this is a favorite thing, one of my favorite things. And so we were selling in the range of like 1,000 a week of this product. After this got on Oprah, after it aired, we were selling about 1,700 an hour.
Wow.
And just on that one product, within 12 months, we did over 100 million in sales.
See, that's where I'm talking about ingenuity was created.
Yeah.
But it was attitude. Automatically, you went from, all right, I lost money. Now that could create a bitterness. But what it did was it created a void in you that you said, I got to avoid that and feel this thing.
Yeah.
So then when you connect and you guys do that, I love the ingenuity of building relationships. And then you took a relationship and knowing what the person, serving them, opened up an opportunity to, the most important part wasn't that you guys went and talked about the product and went to the game. It was the relationship you established during the game.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who played or who won.
Oh, yeah.
And
by the way, we didn't even talk about products for weeks.
See?
We just became friends.
Right. You build the relationships. That's where I think most people don't realize the value of the equity of a relationship. Most people meet you and they go for an ask or they tell you what they do rather than allow you to know who they are.
Yeah.
Because I've learned through the real peak performances that if you really want to get to new heights, you want to go to the next level, you do it with people who have like mind, like faith, like ideas, who come to serve together. In every setting that I've seen you in, instead of you talking about, I never heard you, I didn't know that you guys had done 450 million. That's phenomenal, first of all, which already is something that very few in history have ever done. So kudos for that. But also that I look at it this way, is that every time I keep seeing you, you've always been serving people, and you've taken the lesser role. You haven't taken the spotlight. What is it in you that has allowed you to say, I'd rather serve than to stand there and take credit? Because even when I talk about the team, you're like, it's not me, it's the team.
Well, I mean, I wish I felt like I deserved the credit, but I always know that I am part of a team. So early on, I think what I developed as a unique or recognized as a unique ability from an early age, even till today, is that I do better with the team. I do better playing as a member of the team than trying to be kind of a one-stop shop and say, I can do all these things. I enjoy people, and I recognize that there's a lot of things that are weaknesses for me. And rather than apologize for them or, make a big deal about them, I just work around them. I try to focus on the things that make me more unique and the things that come to me more naturally. So, trying to work with Robert on his vision to help put clear protective screens on phones and watches, it was how do we improve the mobile experience between people and their devices? And so we just tried to come up with a different way of thinking.
How do you serve people and solve a problem?
Yeah.
And when you found one, you found that it fixed your own problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're giving advice to entrepreneurs right now, from just peeling out of this conversation, one of the things was identify what your superpower is. And if you have something to overcome, go after it and use that as your strength, not as your excuse. Develop a way to be able to serve others and find people that you can ask questions of,
And
learn from them. And then not only do that, kind of put a roadmap together of like, who do I want to be in the end?
Yeah.
And talk to the people who are inspired. That's why counsel. And sometimes there are times where you have to take the counsel and go against it, especially when they said it takes luck. Luck you can't quantify. But if they did it, you can do it.
Well, and it's the opportunity. That's what I loved about you got to be lucky. I said, well, maybe luck is just a series of, showing up at the right time at the right place, because you never know.
Yeah.
But I found out that I could create some of my own luck. And so I would probably summarize it this way, that we all have a unique ability. It's not something we're necessarily creating. It's who we are naturally. Because when I'm in the flow of my unique ability, it's not work. It's just me being. I enjoy those opportunities. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot of hard work.
Yeah, no.
Because hard work is just part of the...
That's part of life.
Right.
Right? But not only is that, but even if you look at it from the aspect of Genesis, man, out of the garden, he said, now you're going to have to put in work to see the results. You want fruit, you got to plant some seeds. And in order to plant the seeds, you got to get in the dirt. And if you get in the dirt, you got to have patience to wait for the results. And then you're going to have to protect those seeds because there'll be weeds that'll come to try to choke them out. Everybody's got to go through a process to become something.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, you're giving advice to entrepreneurs. You talk to them about resiliency. You talk about overcoming, about discovering something. But if you would give them advice, maybe a blind side that entrepreneurs normally have been having, what would you tell young entrepreneurs, people that want to be peak performers, what would you tell them that they need to be mindful of?
Well, number one is when people tell you it's impossible, keep working. Because I just think it's a series of failures or no's or it's impossible. And you keep at it, eventually you're going to find your way. So don't be discouraged when doors get closed. I just think that's another opportunity. Secondly, really do try to be honest with yourself and identify, what do I do uniquely well? What is it that shows up in my behavior very naturally? What is it that people want from me that it just comes out every effort, right? I think that unique ability is critical. One of the references for that is a program that I've been involved in for 24 years called the Strategic Coach with Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
Wonderful program. And it really does say we need to focus more on our strengths rather than trying to develop our weaknesses. And I think that's right, because there's a lot of things I'm just going to always be really pretty bad at or average at. But there's a few things that I tend to do naturally well. And so trying to be honest with myself and with others on the things that they can expect from me, that's great. And maybe lastly, it's those daily disciplines. I've had to identify that for me to be most successful, I have to do what I refer to as dailies now. And they're part of me being healthy, me being, mentally awake and doing all the hard things. But if I'm doing my dailies, that is being consistent, doing the disciplines every day, then other things tend to show up. I don't necessarily have to search for it. They tend to find me.
There is There's an idea that I have been floating around. You mentioned the strategic coach. You never realize how small the world is. I never had heard of Dan Sullivan until recently. I happened to be invited to a free zone where I was working with one of my people that I coach, and he happens to go to the same person, so we're both there. And we started spending some time talking and find that there's some connections, chemistry there. So let's talk again. And so we did that this past week. And I was like, that's great. So we left it there, said, look, we'll get back together. We're going to do some things. And they're like, we might have you come out and speak for us. And I'm like, wow, honored. And so last night I go to dinner, and I'm sitting there talking to a young lady, and she's like, man, I've heard of you. And I was like, oh, well, thank you. She said, yeah, I've heard a lot about you. I was like, wow, thank you. And she was like, I was really excited to meet you. And I was like, wow. And I was like, well, tell me about you. I wanted to hear, because she was just so kind. And she was like, my son co-authors the books with Dan Sullivan. And he's writing on people who have rapid ascension, rapid growth, people who just really get into it. And we've been talking about you. You guys got to talk. And I was like, I've learned now, when you walk in flow, your dailies, as you call it,
Yeah.
when you just do those disciplines, the thing that you are gifted to do, just doing your strengths, and not worrying about who hurt me, who did this, who did wrong. I failed back then. 2008 is not today.
Right.
In fact, the 8 is it's called the number of new beginnings, right? And that was what that was for you. Whatever bankruptcy that we've ever experienced, it was to get rid of what was in an account we no longer needed.
Right.
Everything that we acquired from there came with new appreciation, new understanding, and it gave us a sense of resiliency that whatever storm comes my way, I can withstand it. And I was sitting here thinking about the fact that here it is. I sit now before man, that my steps were ordered to meet you, and that when I hear you talk about the things that you've done, this was divine. I thank you for being a servant of others. What you call being a lawyer, you're an advocate for people. And you've been helping entrepreneurs, and on behalf of all those that were here and all those I've served, for those who didn't even know to thank you, because you've saved them by giving who you are into it, not just law. Thank you. You see, no one gets there alone, and you're making sure that people don't have to go through that. You don't just 10x businesses, you 10x people. I'm so thankful to have people like Scott. Scott is a Gordon, but he carries that last name to make sure the last name goes forward. One of the unique things about when I met him, he had on a Rolex, and I said, man, that's a wonderful watch. And he said, it's not mine. I said, well, whose watch is it? He said, it belongs to my children. You see, everything that he has, he thinks with the idea is, I'm a steward, and I need to help my kids be able to come over the false summits and reach the real peak of life. If you want to be great, you got to be a part of a masterclass. Learn from others, and then you'll be able to teach others. Thank you for tuning in.